Hello everybody, my name is Emma. Welcome to my ASMR channel. Today I am going to finish reading from Christina's Kite and Other Stories. There is quite a few stories left to read, but I am going to attempt to read all the remaining ones. So I'm going to get straight onto it and start with The Boy Who Never Put Things Back. Did you ever know a boy called George who could never remember to put things back in their places? Well, this is a story about him. George was about 10 years old and he had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, all older than he was. They were fond of George, although they often called him the baby of the family, which he didn't like at all. He was always trying to be big and grown up so that his brothers and sisters would take him about with them and let him join in their games. I don't like being left out of things just because I'm the youngest, he said to his mother. It's not fair, I can't help being the youngest. There's no need for you to be left out, his mother said. Behave yourself, be kind to others, do odd jobs for them when you can, and you will see they will take you out on picnics with them. There was one thing that George was always getting into trouble for, and that was he would never put things back into their places. Do you know anyone like that? They really are most annoying people. George used to like cutting out from papers and magazines, but he had no scissors of his own, so what did he do but go to his big sister Mary's work basket and borrow her scissors? But when he'd finished cutting out, he wouldn't put the scissors back again. No, he would leave them on the table, then someone would clear them away. When Mary wanted them, they wouldn't be in her work basket, and then she would spend half an hour hunting for them. That would make her very cross. Look, I don't mind you borrowing my things, but you might at least have the decency to put them back, she would say to George. Then he would borrow Alec's pencil and leave it lying somewhere in the garden, or he would go off with Mother's pen to write a letter and not take it back. She would find it in his pocket a week later when she had given up looking for it. His mother and all his older brothers and sisters scolded him well for this silly habit, but although George kept promising to be better, he wasn't. He was too lazy-minded to try and remember to take borrowed things back. Now, one summer, everyone was in a great state of excitement because they were going to the seaside. The older children were going to ride down on their bicycles, picnic on the way, spend a night at camp, and then join the rest of the family at the hotel the next day. George listened to all the arrangements being made. When he heard that only the 4 older ones were to ride down to the sea and he was to go by train the next day, he was hungry and hurt. Mother, why can't I go with the others? I'm 10, aren't I? Why can't I ride with them? I've got a lovely new bicycle. I'm a very good rider. I want to go with the others. Don't talk like that to me, George, said his mother. That's not the way to get anything you want. You wouldn't be able to ride so far. Oh, Mother, I could, said George, and he put his arms around his mother to coax her. Let me, please. Ask Alec if I can't ride well now. Ask Mary. I went all the way to the woods and back with her last week. Oh, do let me. I can't tell you how much I want to ride off with the others and sleep in a camp for the night. I don't want to be a baby and go by train. I should think you could let him come with us, Mother, said Alec. He's good on his bike. I'll look after him. It would be nice for him to have his bike by the sea too, because then he could come for rides and picnics with us, otherwise he won't be able to. They all talked it over, and to George's enormous delight, Mother at last decided to let him ride off with the others. How simply marvellous! I shall feel so big, thought George, as he polished up his bicycle the next day. Fancy going off all by ourselves and sleeping in a camp for the night. The bicycles were kept in 2 sheds. Alec's, Mary's, Peter's and Jane's went in one shed, and George's, his mother's and his father's went in the other. They were all good bicycles. Their father insisted they should be well looked after and cleaned each week. The children thought the day would never come for them to start off, but at last the day before came, and they all took out their bicycles for a last polish and to make sure they had no punctures. They put them back into their sheds, shut the doors, and went to help their mother with the last-minute packing. George was having a friend to tea. It was Penny, the little girl from next door. She collected stamps, and so did George. They had 5 stamp albums each, and they went to tea with one another once a week to swap stamps, stick them into their albums, and gloat over their collections. After tea, the 2 of them took out the stamp collection Penny bent over hers, and then she sat up with a cry. A spot of red had fallen onto her precious album. "Oh, George, my nose is bleeding again. I shall have to sit with my head back until it stops. Wipe that spot carefully off the page for me." "Bother," said George, looking at Penny. Her nose often bled, and it was such a nuisance because then she had to stop whatever she was doing. "Mother's busy," said George, "or I'd fetch her." "It's all right," said Penny, mopping her nose. "It'll soon stop. It never lasts as long." But it did seem to last a long time. Penny lay down on her back on the floor to try and stop it, but it still didn't. "We're wasting all this time," said George. "Isn't there anything else to do for nosebleeding besides lying on the floor?" "Well, once Granny put the biggest key she had down my back," said Penny. "She said that would stop it." "What a funny idea," said George. "Shall we try it? I know where there is a very big key." "All right, fetch it," said poor Penny. "You can stick it down my back and perhaps the coldness will stop the bleeding." George sped off to the bicycle shed where his bike was kept. There was a very big key in the lock there. He took it out and ran back. He pushed it down Penny's back. She squealed. "Oh, it's terribly cold. Oh, it makes me wriggle." But very soon the nose bleeding stopped and she could sit up. "I don't know if it was the key or whether it was really going to stop," she said. "Anyway, I'm better now. Let's get on with our stamps." So they got on with their stamps and had a fine time swapping and arranging. Then it was time for Penny to go. "Goodbye," she said. "Come to tea with me as soon as you get back. I hope you have a fine holiday." "I'm biking down with the others," said George grandly. "I'm going to spend a night at camp. It'll be fine." The next day the children were to set off at 10 o'clock. They had their few night's things with them in kit bags and their packages of food. Mother gave George his too. He did feel proud. "Now get your bikes and I'll come to the front gate to see you off," she said. "Take care of George, Peter." They all went to get their bikes. Alec, Mary, Peter and Jane wheeled theirs out of the shed, but George couldn't get his. "No, the shed's locked," he said. "I can't get my bike." "Well, unlock it, silly," called Alec. "Can't you turn the key?" "It's not here," said George, and he rattled the door. Mother came up. "What's the matter? Don't shake the door like that." "Mother, the key's gone. I can't get in my bike," said George in a panic. "Well, where is the key?" said Mother. "It can't be far away. Has anyone taken it?" "Oh," said George, remembering suddenly. "Yes, I took it. Penny's nose bled yesterday. I borrowed the key to put down her back. It must be in the playroom." He sped off to get it. He hunted everywhere for it. It didn't seem to be anywhere at all. Alec yelled up to him. "Oh, do come on, George. It's 10:15. We shall never get to camp tonight if we start late now." "Oh, wait for me," cried poor George, tearing about the room and hunting for the key. Mother came up and helped him. "George, I don't know how many times I've told you to put things back when you've borrowed them," she said. "Now you see what's happened. You're making everybody late." "Let's try the key of the other shed," said Mary. So they did, but it didn't fit. "We can't wait any more," said Peter at 10:30. "We must go. George must come with you by train, Mother." "No, no, wait for me. Don't go without me," begged George. "Oh, I couldn't bear it, Mother. Can't we break open the door to get to my bike?" "Certainly not," said Mother. "Now, George, this is entirely your own fault. You will have to put up with the result of your silliness. You took the key. You should have put it back. You didn't. So we can't get your bike. The others are not going to wait, so you will have to go with us tomorrow." And that is just what happened. The others mounted their bicycles, waved goodbye and set off without poor George. He was 10 and a big boy, but he was so bitterly disappointed that he went to the bottom of the garden and cried by himself for a whole hour. Daddy was not very comforting that night when he heard about it. "Well, sooner or later I knew that silly habit of yours of taking things and never putting them back would bring you a good punishment," he said. "It's a pity, George, but if you do things like that you must expect things to go wrong." "I wish I knew where the key was," said George. "Oh, Mother, if I don't find it, I suppose I can't take my bike away on the train." "You certainly can't," said Mother. So George spent the whole evening hunting for that key, but he couldn't find it. He had to go to bed very sad indeed. The next day, Mother, Daddy and George got ready for the train. Just about 10 minutes before the taxi cab came, Penny came running up. "George, did you want the key you put down my back yesterday? I went home with it still down my back, but I thought I'd better bring it to you this morning in case it was important." "Penny, you horrid, horrid girl, you went off with the key. Now I haven't been able to go with the others," said George, and he almost slapped Penny. "Stop that, George," said his father at once. "It was you who should have thought of the key and taken it back, not Penny. I won't have you blaming anyone else. That's a coward's trick. Take the blame yourself, as you should act properly." "Sorry, Penny," said George, feeling really ashamed. His father nodded to his mother. Well, as George seems to be sorry, he can take his bike with him. There's just time to get it before the taxi comes. He can bring it on the train with him. George sped off with the key. He got out his bike. Now at least he would be able to go for rides with the others. But what a pity he hadn't been able to go with them the day before. That would have been such a wonderful treat. I shall always put things back in future, thought George. I gave myself terrible disappointment by forgetting about the key. I won't let things like this happen again. Did you guess where the key was? You're very clever if you did. Next story is called The Proud Fir Tree. There was once a beautiful fir tree that lived in a wood. It was the only fir tree there, and it thought a good deal of itself. The other trees around it were oak and beech and hazel, and they were none of them quite so tall as the fir. Once some children had come into the wood and had seen the fir. "Look," said the boy, "see that fir? Hasn't it got a lovely straight trunk? Did you know that the masts of ship were made from the fir tree trunks, Rosie?" "Are they really?" said Rosie, looking up the straight trunk of the fir. "Yes, and telegraph poles too," said the boy. "Not many trees grow such fine straight trunks, Rosie." Well, the fir tree was tremendously proud to hear all this. It swayed about in the wind and made a little song about itself. "Telegraph poles are made from me, and the masts of ship that sail on the sea." The other trees got tired of this song. "After all, a good many things are made from us too," said the oak. "I make lots of beautiful furniture, and the beams and the roofs of many famous old buildings are made of oak." "And I am used for heaps of things too," said the graceful beech. "The gamekeeper comes and cuts his walking sticks from my branches," said the hazel. And even little willow by the stream had something to say too. "I helped to make cricket bats," it said. When the autumn came, the beeches and the oaks and all the other trees in the wood flamed into brilliant colour. You should have seen them. The beech was a mass of gold. The fir was quite jealous of them then. "I suppose you think you are lovely, turning strange colours all of a sudden," it said. "Well, the children think we are lovely," said the beech. "They like to pick up some of my golden leaves and take them to school, and they pluck some of my sprays and press them so they may have vases full of my golden leaves in this winter. Let me tell you this," said the fir. "Every autumn you dress yourselves proudly in gold, red and brown and yellow. Then what happens to you? The frost comes along and loosens all your leaves, and the wind sweeps them off the boughs. Your fine dresses lie scattered on the muddy ground, and you are left bare and cold all through the winter days." "That is quite true," said the oak. "And what about me?" said the fir. "It is true that I don't dress myself up in yellows and reds, but I am sensible enough to keep my branches green all winter long. I don't stand cold and bare and ugly." The other trees knew that this was true. They waved their bare boughs in the wind, whilst the fir waved her green-clad branches in pride. "Are we really ugly now?" said the oak sadly. "I wonder why we shed our pretty leaves. It does seem rather a waste to have to grow them every year." "Perhaps the fir is more sensible than we are after all," said the hazel. "Telegraph poles are made from me, and the masts of ships that sail on the sea," sang the fir tree. Now that winter the sky suddenly became a strange grey leaden colour. The trees looked up, half afraid. "Why is the sky so low and grey?" said the oak. "I don't like it. And listen, the wind is getting up." A cold wind blew. The bare trees waved their branches, and the fir trees shouted in the wind. Then snow fell. It fell steadily all night long. It didn't stop once. The sky was full of snow. When the morning came, the wood looked so different. It was quite white. "What a snowstorm," said the oak, shaking its sturdy boughs. The snow fell off at once. But the oak's branches were soon white with snow again, for there was still plenty of snow to come. All day long it fell, and onto the hills it was more than a metre deep. Then the fir tree began to grumble loudly. "Oh, this snow! Oh, this heavy, heavy snow! I can't bear the weight of it any longer." "Well, shake it off then, as we do," said the oak. "How can I?" said the fir tree crossly. "You have bare branches, so that the snow cannot cling to you as it can to my green branches. I hold the snow with all my boughs. Oh, how heavy it is! Stop snowing, sky! I can bear the weight no longer." But the snow went on snowing. Then there came a loud crack. All the trees were startled. What could it be? They could see nothing. "I am afraid I am breaking," said the fir tree sadly. "That was one of my branches." Crack! Another branch broke. The fir tree shivered. A mass of snow slipped down from its branches. Crack! "Good gracious, the fir tree will be broken to bits," said the oak. "I do hope the snow stops soon." It stopped very soon. Then the weather turned warmer and all the snow melted. The trees stretched themselves and looked at the fir tree. Poor, poor thing! All its beautiful branches were broken and hung sadly down. One was already on the ground. It was no longer beautiful. "Why did I boast that I kept my leaves?" said the fir tree sadly. "If I had thrown them down as you did, oak tree, the snow would have slipped easily from my boughs. They would have not broken beneath the great weight of the snow. What an unhappy tree I am! I am ashamed of my looks now. I shall never, never sing my little song again." We will grow our branches more closely around you to hide your broken sides," promised the beech. "After all, you still have a fine straight trunk." So the other trees grew their branches quite close to the fir and hid the places where his dead branches had fallen off. He was grateful and friendly. "Well, fir tree, you may not be so beautiful now, but you are much nicer to know," said the oak next summer, and his leaves whispered by the thousand. "That's something," said the fir tree, stretching his high head to the sky. "That's certainly something." So that's the end of that story. The next one is called On Firework Night. Jinky the gnome came rushing down the village street, shouting at the top of his voice, "The Green Goblin has got Pippi and Tickles and Ho-Ho. He's caught them and taken them to his castle." Everyone came running out to hear the bad news. "That goblin! We've had nothing but bad luck ever since he came to our village," said Dame Shuffle. "However are we to rescue Pippi and the others?" asked Old Man Spectacles. "He'll shut them up in his castle and keep them prisoners for always. He'll never let them out, never." "We're none of us safe nowadays," said Mother Bonnet. "That goblin! I'd like to have him here this very minute. I'd give him such a whacking with my stick." "You wouldn't. You'd run to your cottage, shut the door and bolt it," said Dame Shuffle. "We're all scared of him, and that's the truth." "Yes, we are," said Jinky. "But scared or not, somehow we've got to rescue our friends." But that wasn't going to be easy. The Green Goblin locked them up in his castle on the hill outside of the village and wouldn't let them out at all. They had to help him with his spells, cook his meals, sweep his floors, and make his bed. Oh, how they hated it. A little mouse lived in a hole behind the kitchen wall. Pip asked him to take a note to Jinky for him. The mouse disappeared with it. I do apologise for that. And faithfully delivered it to Jinky. Jinky read the note. Please think of some way to save us. We can't even get out into the garden, and if we did there is a high wall round. What can we do? Please do think of some way to save us." Jinky showed the note to everyone, and the village held a meeting about it. "Now, we must all think hard," said Jinky. "Shut your eyes, everyone, and think." They were sitting there with their eyes shut when they heard a bang. It made them jump. They all opened their eyes and gazed around. A little elf called Tricky was trying his hardest not to laugh. Jinky pounced on him. "Was it you that made that bang? What was it, you naughty elf, making us jump like that?" "Please, Jinky, it was only a firework," said Tricky, trying to wriggle away. "It's Guy Fawkes' Day soon." "You know, and I've got some fireworks. Humans have them on firework night, so I didn't see why I shouldn't have some too." Jinky shook the elf hard and he cried. But then an idea slipped into Jinky's mind and he dropped the little elf and began to think about it. "I say," he said at last. "I say, I've got an idea, but I don't know if it'll work. But if it does, it will. If it does, it will get the missing pixies out into the goblin's garden, with a bit of luck, right over the wall too." "What's your idea?" cried everyone excited. "Tell us, Jinky." "Well," said Jinky, "we'll send a fine big box of fireworks to the Green Goblin. I don't expect him to know what they are, so the pixies will tell him. They can offer to set them off for him, and when the rockets go flying up into the air, they can go with them high over the wall." "Oh, what a very, very good idea," said Dame Shuffle. "Couldn't be better," said Old Man Spectacles. "We'll try it," said Mother Bonnet, "but we must send a message by the mouse to tell the pixies what we are doing. Then they will know what they must do too." So they sent a note by the mouse. "The Green Goblin will receive a present of fireworks. You can explain what they are and offer to set them off in the garden. Hold on to the rockets and ride up in the air with them. You will soon be over the wall and back again with us." When the 3 pixies got this note, they were very excited. They kept an eye on the Green Goblin's post, and one day they saw him with a big brown paper parcel. "What is that, master?" asked Ho-Ho. The Green Goblin pulled off the paper and string. He stared at the gaily covered lid of the box, and then he opened the box. "What are these?" he said in surprise when he saw the collection of squibs, Catherine wheels, Roman candles, rockets, and other things. "Fireworks for fireworks night," said Ho-Ho. "Surely you have heard of Firework Night, Goblin? It is a night of bangs and pops and bonfires everywhere. It really is a treat belonging to the world of humans, but some of us little folk like to share it too." "But what happens to these things?" said the Goblin, picking up a rocket. "Be careful!" shouted Ho-Ho, making the Goblin drop the rocket in alarm. "Unless you know how to use those fireworks, you may damage yourself. Be careful." "When is Fireworks Night?" asked the Goblin. "Tomorrow," said Pippi. "How I wish we were going to be at home and set off the fireworks and light a bonfire." "Oh, do you know how to set these things off then?" asked the Goblin eagerly. "You shall set them going for me tomorrow night." But you won't let us go out into the garden," said Tickles. "We can't let them off indoors." "Well, I'll let you go out tomorrow night," said the Goblin, "but I shall put magic into the high wall so that none of you can climb it to escape." "We shan't try to climb it," said Ho-Ho, and winked slyly at the other 2 pixies. "We'll just have fun setting off the fireworks. You can watch from the windows, master. You'll be quite safe indoors." So the next night the 3 pixies hurried out into the garden with the fireworks and plenty of matches. "We'll set off the Catherine wheel first," said Ho-Ho. "They will please the Goblin. Then the Roman candles, then some coloured fire." So they began. The wheels whizzed round like circles of flame, and the Goblin cheered. He liked the Roman candles too, though he jumped when they began, and almost ran to hide himself under the bed. He thought everything was wonderful. He kept knocking on the window and shouting, "More, more!" "Now for the rockets," said Tickles. "Here they are, almost as big as we are ourselves. Now see what I'm going to do. I'll put a big one here with its stick in the ground, and another over here, and the 3rd one here." "Shall we each go to one and hold it?" asked Ho-Ho. "Yes, I'll come and light yours first, Pippi," said Tickles. "Then yours, Ho-Ho. When you have both flown safely up into the air, I'll light my own and follow you. Now don't be frightened when the rocket bursts into stars. Keep hold of the stick and let it take you safely over the wall, up into the air, and then down to the ground outside." He did just as he said. First he lit Pippi's rocket, and up it went with a terrific whoosh. Whoosh. Then he lit Ho-Ho's, and up went that pixie too. Then he lit his own. He flew up as well, and the watching Goblin cheered and yelled. Each rocket burst into a great shower of coloured stars. After that there was silence. No more fireworks, no more bangs, and no more pops. No more shouts from the pixies in the garden. They were not there. The Goblin got bored. He threw up the window. "Get on with the fireworks. What's the matter with you? There are plenty more rockets." There was no answer. In a rage the Goblin ran out to the garden. There was nobody there. He hunted everywhere with his big lantern, but the pixies had gone. Where? How? It was the biggest puzzle the Green Goblin had ever known. He caught sight of a big glare down the village. Good gracious, whatever could that be? Was a house on fire? He hurried down to the village to see. It was, of course, the bonfire built to burn the guy, and you can imagine what guy the villagers were burning. Yes, it was a Green Goblin guy, of course, as like the real Goblin as one pea is to another. Before he reached the bonfire, what did the Goblin see but the 3 pixies dancing about like mad, overjoyed at being free once more. They had fallen to earth outside the wall with the rocket sticks, and had scampered down to the village to join the fun. The Goblin gave a roar. "Hey, you! Come back to my castle at once!" There was a howl of fright from everyone. The goblin ran after the 3 pixies and came up to the bonfire. What was that sitting in a chair in the middle of the flames, burning away merrily? The green goblin stared at the guy in dismay. It's me! I'm in that chair in the flames. They're burning me! The green goblin. Oh, I'll soon be burnt to nothing. Let me go. Let me go. He thinks he's the goblin in the fire. He thinks he's looking at himself. Goggled Ho-Ho. Run, green goblin, run before you burn to bits. The green goblin ran. How he ran! You couldn't see his legs. He ran so fast. He didn't stop running till he got to the land of goodness knows where, and there he stayed. He looked at himself all over. Was he burnt? Was he all right? He'd never go back to that pixie village again. He didn't, so the pixies took the castle for their own. They give parties in it whenever anyone has a birthday. When is yours? Let them know. Maybe they'll send you an invitation. And the next story is called Stand on Your Own Feet. Peter was the boy next door. He was 11 years old and strong and jolly and always laughing. Anne liked him very much. Anne was 10 but small for her age. People thought she was 8. She was shy and timid and was so afraid of being scolded for anything that she never owned up when she was in the wrong. She sat on the wall and watched Peter shooting arrows at a target. Come and have a try, said Peter, so she slid down and took the big bow. Oh dear, it's so big, it won't spring back and hurt me, will it? Aren't you a little coward, said Peter, laughing. Of course it won't. Look, do it like this. It was fun playing with Peter. They took turns at shooting arrows at the target, then suddenly Anne shot one that went right over the wall. There was a loud meow, and the next door cat let high in the air. The arrow had hit it. Oh, poor thing, said Peter, and he was over the wall in a flash. But the cat, full of terror, ran away limping. Peter knew he couldn't catch it. He went back over the wall. We'd better go round and knock at Miss Milner's door, tell her you hit the cat by accident, said Peter. Anne stared at him in the greatest alarm. What? Going on up to old Miss Milner, who had a very cross face indeed? Why, she wouldn't know a thing about the cat if nobody told her, so why tell her? We don't need to say anything, said Anne. She would never know it was one of our arrows that hit her cat. I don't expect the cat's hurt much anyway. Miss Milner is terribly fierce, you know. Peter looked fierce too, quite suddenly. He stared scornfully at Anne. Do you know what you are? You're a cowardly custard, afraid of owning up. That cat might be badly hurt. We don't know, and we ought to tell about it. We didn't do it on purpose. Miss Milner will know it was an accident. Oh, but Peter shall be so cross, said Anne, her eyes filling with tears. And what does that matter? Said Peter, still in his horrid, scornful voice. Have people never been cross with you? Why shouldn't they be sometimes? I feel very cross with you myself. I know it's horrid when people are cross, but even if we don't like it, we needn't be afraid of it. You come with me then, Peter, wept Anne. You tell Miss Milner. And oh, couldn't you say it was your arrow that hit the cat? I always feel so scared when things like this happen. You're big and brave, you're a boy. I'm a girl, and Mummy says I'm timid and sensitive. Timid and sensitive, Peter said sneeringly. That's what people often say when their children are cowardly and deceitful. Oh, you're only a year younger than I am. What does it matter if you're a girl? I've got a cousin of 9 called Jean. And she's as brave as anything. She's coming to stay soon, and I'll be glad to have her. She can stand on her own feet. You always want to stand on somebody else's. I don't, sobbed Anne, thinking Peter was very unkind. You do, said Peter. When you got into trouble at school, you asked your mother to put it right for you instead of taking your punishment properly. And when you broke Lucy's ruler in half, you were afraid to tell her. You got George to explain about it to Lucy. And now you want me to go and tell Miss Milner that I shot the arrow at the cat. Why can't you stand on your own 2 feet? Anne didn't answer. She wiped her eyes and sniffled. You'll grow up into a milk and water, namby-pamby, weak and silly person, went on Peter. My mother says people like that have never learned to stand on their own feet and face up to things. Anne began to cry. You don't like me. You won't want to play with me any more. Peter looked at Anne and felt sorry for her, but not too sorry. No, that would never do. He took her arm and shook it gently. Anne, I am going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something nice now. I do like you. You're fun to play with, and if you'd be brave and stand on your own feet always, I'd like you as much as I like anyone, but if you don't stand on your own feet, I shan't be friends with you at all. You won't be worth it." Anne sniffed again, then wiped her eyes and put away her hanky. She looked at Peter, so straight and tall and fearless. She would never, never be like him, but she could at least try. She didn't want him to think Jean was wonderful and play only with her when she came to stay with him. It would be horrid to be left out because she was feeble and silly and a coward. "I think you've said worse things than any grown-ups would say," she told him, "but I think perhaps you're right. I don't believe I ever do stand on my own feet. You watch me now." And to Peter's enormous surprise, she went out of his garden and up the front path to Miss Milner's house, where she knocked on the door. When she heard footsteps along the hallway inside, she almost ran away. This was the first time that Anne had ever owned up to anything by herself. And although she had felt very brave when she had spoken to Peter, she didn't feel at all brave now. The door opened, and there stood the cross-faced Miss Milner. "What do you want?" she said. Anne could hardly get the words out, she was so afraid. "Please, quite by accident, I hit your cat with an arrow. I thought I'd better tell you in case she was hurt. I am so sorry." Anne stammered all this out with a very red face, but then turned to run away. But Miss Milner caught hold of her arm. "Wait," she said. "Let's have a look at the cat. She's in the kitchen. How nice of you to tell me. Most children would not have said a word." Anne's heart was still beating fast as she went with Miss Milner to the kitchen. The cat was there in front of the fire. Miss Milner examined her. "She has a little lump on this leg, but that's all," she said. "I don't think she's hurt much. Thank you for telling me. I think a lot of you for that. And when I see your mother, I shall tell her what a brave little girl she's got to come and own up like this." "Peter made me," said Anne, going red again. "I was afraid to." "Well, here are biscuits for you both," said Miss Milner, reaching up for a tin. "I made them myself. That boy Peter is a good lad. Absolutely trustworthy. He'll make a fine man. There's no doubt about that." She gave Anne the biscuits and smiled at her. Anne was astonished. Why, Miss Milner hadn't a cross face at all. She thanked her and raced back to Peter, her face glowing. They munched the biscuits together while Anne told her all that had happened. "There you are, you see. As soon as you stand on your own feet, things aren't nearly so frightening as you think," said Peter. "But mind you, even if they are frightening, it's still no reason for not facing up to them. I must say I never thought you had it in you, Anne, to own up like that." Anne thought about many things that night in bed. She remembered a lot too. She remembered how she had once broken one of the panes in the garden shed, hadn't owned up to it, and Daddy thought it was the odd-job boy who had done it. She remembered how she had got into trouble at school over forgotten homework and had begged her mother to go and tell her teacher she hadn't been well, and that was why the work wasn't done. Oh dear, and Mother had done what Anne wanted. Perhaps Mother didn't know it was wrong not to let her stand on her own feet. Anne remembered other things Mother was always making excuses for. She wouldn't let Daddy scold her when she'd broken his fountain pen. She wouldn't let Granny be cross with her when Anne had left the tap running in the basin and flooded the floor. She hadn't even made Anne go and tell Granny herself. Mother had gone to tell her to explain. "I've been standing on other people's feet for ages," thought Anne, feeling ashamed. "It's going to be hard to stand on my own now, but I hope they'll bear my weight." That made her smile. She thought of Peter, however afraid he might be. He always seemed strong and brave and sensible. She wanted him to think well of her. She fell asleep making up her mind that she would be far, far better than his wonderful cousin Jean. Well, it wasn't easy to keep her word to Peter. All kinds of things happened that seemed to make things as difficult as possible. She lost one of her exercise books on the way to school, and because she knew she would have to stay in at playtime and get a few sharp words from her teacher, she simply could not tell her. She kept thinking what to say and then not saying it. In despair, she went to Peter between lessons and told him, "I'm a coward after all," she said. "I simply can't own up. Now you go straight away this minute and say, 'Miss Brown, I'm sorry. I must have dropped my exercise book on the way to school,'" said Peter. "Go on, this very minute. The more you think of it, the worse it'll be. It's best to do these things at once." Peter was right, of course. It was always best to face up to things at once and get them over. Miss Brown wasn't even cross. She put her hand into her desk and brought out Anne's exercise book. "Here it is," she said. "Somebody picked it up and brought it to me. Put your name in it. You know that's the rule." Anne felt so relieved. How silly she had been to worry herself all morning. If only she had gone to Mrs. Brown at once. The next day she broke one of Mother's vases. Anne was horrified. Still, she knew how to get round Mother. She would wait till Mother found the vase, and she would say that she had meant to tell her, and she would cry, and Mother wouldn't scold at all. You coward, Anne said to herself when she thought all this. Horrid, deceitful little coward, go at once and tell Mother. And she went. Mother was upset and told Anne she was careless. Yes, said Anne, I was careless. Let me buy you another vase out of my own money, Mother. That made Mother feel very pleased. Anne suddenly felt pleased with herself. How nice it was to stand on your own feet. You really think more of yourself. She felt quite 10 centimetres taller. Then Daddy was quite cross because Anne had left her bicycle out in the rain. Usually she would have run to tell Mother and cried and asked her to tell Daddy she hadn't meant to, but not this time. Daddy, I'm sorry, she said. I absolutely forgot my bike. I'll dry it and clean it this evening. It won't happen again. Her father looked at her in surprise. Usually Anne wept buckets of tears and made all kinds of excuses. This was a new Anne, and Annie liked very much. Spoken like a brave lass, he said, and Anne went red with pleasure. Still, things weren't easy at all because it does take a long time to learn to stand on your own feet when you've been using someone else's for 10 years. Anne was often afraid, often quite in despair when things went wrong, and she had to somehow summon up enough courage to face them all by herself. She was determined not to ask Mother or Daddy or Peter to help in anything. It must be her own feet she stood on and nobody else's. Everyone noticed the change in Anne, only Peter understood it. He was pleased and proud of himself because he had made Anne into a nicer person, and proud of Anne for being able to find the courage to do it. Then just before Peter's cousin Jean was due to arrive, something else happened. Anne was out on her bicycle riding some way behind a small boy. Suddenly a dog ran out and collided with the back wheel of the boy's bicycle. Off he fell at once and lay in the road, squealing with fright and pain. And what did Anne do? She didn't do what she would have done 3 weeks before, screamed and ridden away as fast as she could. No, she rode up to the boy, shooed away the big playful dog, helped up the screaming child and took him to the nearest house to have his cut knees seen to. She found out his name and address and went riding off to tell his mother and to ask her to come and fetch him home. Peter heard about it because the boy's mother was a great friend of his own mother's and told her all about Anne. A more sensible, helpful child than I never saw, said the little boy's mother. Stood on her own feet, did all the right things at once. Now I do like a child like that. Peter was bursting with pride. He rushed off to tell Anne. She went red and looked away. She was so pleased to hear Peter's praise she couldn't say a word. Glad you're my friend, said Peter. You really are a friend to be proud of. It's a pity Jean's coming tomorrow, said Anne with a sigh. Just as I'm getting sensible enough to be your friend, now you'll have Jean and you won't want anyone else to play with. Jean will like you awfully, said Peter. Come and play every day, will you? We'll go for picnics together and go swimming. It'll be fun, the 3 of us. It is fun. Anne's having a lovely time. She always stands on her own feet now. And what I would dearly like to know is, do you? Right. I know I said I was going to try and get all these stories read in one, but I don't think I'm going to be able to, as the video is getting quite long now, and I've still got quite a few to go. So what I will do is I will do another video, and hopefully that should be the end. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to my channel and share my videos, and see you on the next one. Bye bye.